terrifying accidents.
Oh, that is horrible. Good Lord.
Up in the thin air and on the high seas. When danger calls,
Fire department emergency. There's a structure fire fully engulfed.
they are the ones to answer.
You know, we had a matter of seconds.
Seeing this incredible act of just instinctive heroism was quite amazing.
Get on the radio, Coc Rescues!
Amazing acts of courage.
I asked the man upstairs, help me.
It was the obvious thing to do. It was the human thing to do.
Lives hanging in the balance.
I thought he was just knocked unconscious. I tried.
In times of crisis, they rely on each other.
I trust some guys with my life. If it took one of them guys going down also, I knew that they would do that. For, you know, that we'd do that for each other. It's a brotherhood.
Caught on camera, extreme rescues. Welcome to Caught on Camera. I'm Contessa Brewer. You're in a life or death situation and you can't help yourself. Often survival depends not just on luck, but also on the heroic acts of another person. They might be trained rescue professionals or simply bystanders tapping into courage they never knew they had. Watch what happens when a helicopter crashes into a remote pineapple field, pinning the pilot. A helicopter out of control.
Get on the radio, Coc Rescues!
One man is frantically trying to save another man's life. It'll take near superhuman strength, but Warren Amaral refuses to let his friend Steve die, not here and not now.
You know, you see your friend there. If you're not going to do nothing, you're going to lose your friend. So I asked the man upstairs, help me.
And Warren, affectionately known to his friends as Tiny because of his size, needs the help, especially for what he's about to attempt. Steve is in a ditch, unconscious, underwater, and his legs are pinned down by the weight of the chopper. It seems impossible, but Tiny will somehow have to get the nearly 2,000-pound helicopter off his friend if he has any chance at survival. Victoria Keith is there too, filming the action, and she can't believe what she's witnessing.
He's not moving at all. We couldn't tell whether he was alive or dead.
Tiny's moving fast, barking commands. But how will he get the ton of metal off the pilot? It'll take more than instincts or heroism to save his friend's life.
I know that when people are under stress, you can summon up some kind of strength that might not be available to you ordinarily. And I think that's what was going on with Tiny.
But Tiny's also fueled by something else, a strong bond with the pilot, stemming from an experience most people wouldn't or couldn't understand unless they were there.
Myself and Steve Cox were both in Vietnam.
Tiny says he considers anyone he served with a brother. Steve was a chopper pilot, and Tiny, the captain of a small, heavily armed riverboat.
They did a lot of cover for us. We were taking heavy weapons fire, we were under attack. They used to fly over, give us cover.
The two served at the same time, but didn't know each other then. And now, all these years later, one of Tiny's own is in trouble.
Well, that was the main thought in my mind. This is a vet. He's home with me. This is not a way for him to die. This is my buddy. We weren't sure all what we did to come home, and this way, no.
The two Vietnam veterans, now employees of the Hawaiian Electric Company, show up in this remote pineapple field earlier that day to move equipment and materials into the area. Victoria Keith is there too, filming an instructional video for the company.
I began filming some of the trips that Steve was taking. He was a really great pilot. He was really familiar with the helicopter. Steve was also the pilot for the Magnum series. Everyone in Hawaii recognized the Magnum PI helicopter.
Maybe you can find a place to set us down.
It was brown and it had an orange stripe on it.
Steve makes 3 trips with his famous helicopter. Victoria films from below, and everything seems routine until the 4th trip, when Steve reports mechanical trouble to Tiny on the radio.
Tiny began saying things like, oh, come on, Steve, you did it in you can get this bird down.
Steve momentarily regains control of the chopper.
So he said he's going to land it. As he was coming down, he still he had erratic movement. But then he had the bird under control. We said, oh, he's got it. Everything's fine. I just told him, oh, Steve, you got it, brother. Bring it down.
It was about 2 feet from the earth. It just turned over on its side and came right for us with the rotors sideways. I thought it might explode.
Fuel is leaking from the crashed craft, and it could blow at any second. But that's not what's on Tiny's mind.
In Vietnam, we've seen a lot of choppers crash on the river. You react quick. If you don't, you lose a buddy.
So Tiny gets to the smoldering helicopter fast.
When I got to the ditch, Steve was underwater. Couldn't see anything. So I didn't know if he was alive or he was dead.
Get on the radio, Coc Rescues!
Firing orders, Tiny instructs another worker to get Steve's head above water. And that's when Tiny sees his biggest problem.
At that time is when I found out his foot was pinned.
Tiny told his assistant, I'm going to lift this helicopter. I want you to reach under there and grab his foot.
I guess it warned it. It's pinned. There's no way. I don't think Steve's going to make it.
Get help! You get help!
I said, the only thing we can do is lift his thing to get his leg free.
What?
Tiny then reached down, lifted up the rotors, and did kind of a sumo wrestler "aye" sound.
Get his leg up!
Lifted the helicopter with his bare hands.
2 legs! Huh?
Tiny said, you got his foot? And Henry said, yeah. He said, 2 feet. He had both feet clear, and then he set the helicopter back down. It was like incredible.
But Steve's not out of danger yet. He's breathing, but still unconscious when Tiny and the other workers lift him onto the bank.
Get some blankets!
And at that point, he lifted his hand up, and we knew he was alive. So that was a great relief.
Tiny sees Steve's arm is badly injured, so he takes his shirt off and packs the arm in ice.
You're all right.
I think that it's that kind of training that comes with the battlefield experience. You have certain knowledge of what has to be done in an emergency, and you just do it.
But now, Tiny can hand it off to the paramedics, who arrive by air. Steve is brought to the nearest hospital with only a broken arm to show for the accident. Victoria thinks he has Tiny to thank for that.
He didn't seem to think for a moment that he couldn't do that. It was just, okay, his foot is trapped, I'm going to have to lift this helicopter. Seeing this incredible act of just instinctive heroism was quite amazing.
In the weeks and months that follow, Tiny is hailed a hero. But Tiny doesn't see it that way at all. He says it's natural, not heroic, to help anyone in that situation. But he's especially glad he was able to help his friend.
It made me feel good that I helped one of my vet friends. It's emotional when you think about your buddies. I'm home. A lot of guys didn't come home. That's the emotional part for me, is my friends who didn't make it home. I never want to see a friend die like that again.
Tiny's friends watch the video of him pulling that helicopter up, and they tell him they wish he would have pulled up something else as well.
They joked to me about my pants, because my pants were so low, they said the moon was showing over Hawaii.
A normal day at a trapeze school turns upside down.
Oh my God.
We saw a body floating down the river.
Can they get to the victim in time? And
An incredible force literally ripped me from the mountain.
9 climbers tumble into a crevasse at Mount Hood.
This is kind of tricky flying when you're that close to the edge of the mountain.
And when rescuers try to save them, disaster strikes.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that is horrible.
When caught on camera, Extreme Rescues continues. September 22nd, 2005. Class is in full swing at Trapeze School, New York. Beginners are learning to fly and catch from instructors, including Jonah Spear.
It was, I think it was our first class of the day.
Sweep, legs not so high and back.
We spent 2 hours with them working on the ground and in the air on flying trapeze tricks.
One of the students, Neil Edley, takes his turn on the bar. A classmate films him with his digital camera.
We were flying on the trapeze. I was up on the board, getting ready to do my flight, and emergency personnel came in.
A police officer showed up at the gate and it said, "Hey, does anybody have some rope or anything?" We kind of got down and said, "Well, yeah, we're trapeze school. What do you need?"
A man has just fallen into the Hudson River, which sits next to the trapeze school. Without blinking, Jonah and co-instructor Paul Cannon grab rope and other rescue equipment and take off toward the river.
When we get there, we saw a body floating down the river about 25 or 30 feet out.
Somehow, a man later identified as James Q has fallen into the river, and now he appears unconscious and needs saving. A small crowd is building, but nobody seems to be doing anything. With no time to waste, Paul jumps in. Jonah ties a rope to the edge of the rail and jumps off the 8-foot ledge after him.
I was scared of jumping in the water. I didn't know what was under there. I didn't know if I was going to impale myself on something.
Oh my God. I was like, oh my God, what are they doing? Are they crazy? I didn't know what was going to happen.
By the time Jonah and Paul get into the water, the victim is nowhere to be found. Both trained lifeguards, Jonah and Paul, frantically search the murky water, knowing they don't have much time.
We both had our heads above water and we're looking around and we couldn't see him. We knew he was under and we looked at each other and we just went under. And we both swam straight down to see if we could run into something.
But the man is nowhere in sight. They dive down again, and this time, Paul doesn't come up alone. Jonah rushes to help.
When we got to the surface, Paul had his arm around James and was holding his head above the water. James was completely limp, ashen gray. I didn't know if he was a corpse, really, at that point.
James Q isn't breathing, and Jonah knows he needs to get him out of the water fast, but hoisting him to solid ground becomes an impossible task.
It was a fool's errand. He was too heavy and the rope was too thin, and regardless of the strength of the guys up on shore, it wasn't working.
Just then, Jonah realizes that some of those bystanders are students from his class, and they're wearing something that could help.
Do you want a belt? I have one on.
All our students are standing there with safety belts, and so we had one of them throw a safety belt down. Paul held him up and treaded water like a champion, and I ducked under and tied the safety belt around him real quickly.
With the belt securely in place, rescuers give it everything they have, pulling James up.
Oh my God, this guy's dead.
When they get him to the surface, it appears their courageous efforts are in vain.
He looked like he was dead.
But one of the students in the class knows CPR. After about a minute of breathing and chest compressions, James finally begins to show some signs of life.
He foamed at the mouth and at the nose and rustled almost unnoticeably, but to the point where we could see that he was breathing on his own again. And that was amazing, amazing to watch him literally come back to life.
Paramedics arrive about 10 minutes later to take James to the hospital, where he checks out okay and makes a full recovery. Neil believes his teachers were extremely courageous to risk their lives to save another.
They just went with it and did what they had to do. They did not stop to think about it at all. They really did an amazing job, and they are heroes, in my book.
Coming up.
There was a loud squealing sound, and the next second, the wildest bungee jump you've ever been on.
4 bridge inspectors teetering high above a river.
Just dangling there. I wasn't sure what they were doing. Were they figuring out how to get us? Were we hopeless?
And fishermen caught in the perfect storm.
They're pitting themselves against Mother Nature. Mother Nature wins sometimes.
A massive wave washes the captain and a crewman into the frigid water.
There were about 3 others that came through and just boom, boom, boom. We're sitting up there going, what are we going to do now?
When caught on camera, Extreme Rescues continues.
Yes, I have an emergency at the Bain Point Bridge construction site. What's wrong?
A crane arm snaps, leaving 3 people dangling underneath the Dames Point Bridge, nearly 150 feet above the St. Johns River in Jacksonville, Florida. When Fire Division Chief Randy Napoli arrives just minutes later, he knows he has his work cut out for him.
I could see that arm hanging straight down with the basket on the end. I feared we may lose the entire arm with all 3 individuals on it. Had the boom hit the water from over 100 feet, it would not have been a good situation.
Kim Brooks is one of the people clinging to life in that basket. She's a Department of Transportation intern. Earlier that morning, she arrived, excited to inspect her first big bridge.
The bridge had been recently constructed, so we were checking for stress cracks. When we had to go underneath the bridge and over the water, some anxiety.
But Kim is out with a group of veterans, a senior bridge inspector and 2 contractors who helped build the bridge. None of them anticipate any danger. But suddenly, the engine on the mechanical arm gives out.
There was a loud squealing sound, and the next second, the wildest bungee jump you've ever been on.
Instantly, one of the contractors is thrown into the river, and the other 3 are now teetering between life and death.
I was afraid, but there's a natural instinct to survive.
But there isn't much Kim can do. She's lying, helpless, along with colleague Sam Martin in the unstable bucket, trying their best not to move. Kim's very concerned about Sam. He has a medical condition, and she fears the trauma of the accident may affect his heart.
Sam looked extremely red, and with the pressure, that was my concern, making sure he remained calm.
But Kim knows if they have it bad, contractor Bruce Boyles has it worse. He's hanging below them from his safety harness, which is still connecting him to the bucket. One wrong move could send them all crashing into the water below.
We were just encouraging him to hang on, hang in there. The help was on the way.
Kim doesn't know it from her position in the bucket, but the contractor who fell into the river has survived and is pulled to safety below. Now rescuers on the bridge are trying to devise a plan to save the rest of them.
Captain Randy Fulford was one of the individuals that I knew had recent high-angle rescue training that I knew would make the rescue more safe, both for the individuals we were rescuing, but also for our own rescuers.
Firefighters record the action with their own video cameras. They're hoping to catch this rare, high-angle rescue on camera to be used in a training video one day. Minutes pass. They're prepping Captain Fulford, but down in the bucket, Kim is starting to wonder if they will ever be saved.
Just dangling there, I wasn't sure what they were doing. Were they figuring out how to get us? Were we hopeless?
But now Captain Fulford is on his way to Kim and the others.
I couldn't feel him necessarily moving when he was coming down, but clearly you can feel, we felt his weight when he stood on top of the boom.
Remarkably, despite the added weight, the bucket holds steady. Finally, after just under an hour of uncertainty, Captain Fulford is a welcome sight to an exhausted Kim Brooks.
Secure my tagline!
Just that first sound of the first hook was comforting enough to know that we were okay.
Okay, but she's not on her way to safety just yet. After assessing the condition of the bucket, Fulford decides Bruce needs to come up first.
We knew that individual was under more stress than the other 2.
Hold it! All right, hold on.
It's a quick ride up, only 2 minutes. But Bruce Boyles can't get his feet on steady ground fast enough.
Glad to be back.
Next, it's Kim's turn, and she's pulled to safety in a matter of minutes, too.
The adrenaline rush and just knowing that you were being rescued, anything that was remotely a concern quickly went out the window.
And last but not least, finally Sam Martin, like Kim and Bruce before him, is out of the bucket and on safe ground. It's a long hour and a half, but amazingly, everyone has now been rescued. Division Chief Napoli credits all of the police and fire crews on the bridge that day with saving the inspectors' lives.
It was a difficult technical rescue with high possibility of loss of life.
He believes things would have been much worse if the whole crane arm had fallen into the water.
They either would have sunk with the piece of equipment, or the trauma they sustained when it hit the water would have not been good for them.
And while some of the inspectors did suffer minor injuries, the emotional impact of the accident has had a lasting effect on Kim. She left her internship at the Department of Transportation shortly after the crane arm collapse and now works for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, restoring the Everglades.
I can clearly say that the Kim that went down that particular day in the boom was not the same person that was hoisted up. Now I'm a better person, making better choices, and I value people more than I did beforehand.
An accident high atop Mount Hood.
I saw his wedding ring, and that really made me upset, knowing that he had someone that had no idea that he might not make it off that mountain.
But choppers are on the way.
This is kind of tricky flying when you're that close to the edge of the mountain.
At a higher altitude, the air is thinner, and so the helicopter has to work harder to maintain a hover.
And
I was just saying to myself, God, let it hit the building, because I knew if the ladder came all the way down, he was going to die.
when caught on camera, Extreme Rescues continues. Welcome back to Caught on Camera. I'm Contessa Brewer. Professional rescuers try to train for every scenario, but by its nature, a rescue usually involves some element of danger. So what happens when things go horribly wrong, when things are turned upside down, and it's the rescuers who need rescuing? A deadly accident. 9 mountain climbers tumble one after another into a crevasse at Mount Hood in Oregon. A helicopter swoops down for a daring rescue in the thin air, 11,000 feet up.
It is amazing that we have the kind of folks that will go up in the mountain like this and put their lives on the line.
But the situation quickly goes from bad to worse.
Oh, that is horrible. Good Lord. Oh, fellas. Oh, my goodness. You're watching this live, folks. If you know a prayer, say it.
And now it's the rescuers who need help. Just moments before the rescue chopper came crashing to the ground, its arrival was the most welcome sight to Selena Maestas, one of the climbers waiting on the ice, hoping for a miracle. This is her first trip to Mount Hood, and just before the climb that morning, she has an uneasy feeling, admitting to her boyfriend, Jeremiah, she's nervous.
Jeremiah and I promised each other no one would die on this trip.
It was a joke, of course. Then Selena and Jeremiah, both paramedics, are attempting the summit with some experienced climbers, 6 of them paramedics or firemen. So they set out about 4 a.m. on a perfect spring morning. And by 8 a.m., their group is nearing the summit.
It was great. I had a great rhythm going. I was excited. It was gorgeous up there. And I was thinking at the summit, I couldn't imagine what I was going to be able to see from up there.
Just before the final push to the top, Selena and the others are standing on a spiny ridge just above this menacing crevasse known as the Bergstrom.
When I did get up there and look down, I was surprised at how big it was.
Just as Selena's group approaches that imposing crevasse, 2 other climbing groups are enjoying a spectacular view atop the mountain. One of those groups includes preacher Thomas Hillman, who has just made it to the summit.
It's just crystal clear, just perfect, perfect.
Meanwhile, in Selena and Jeremiah's group, the 7 climbers decide to follow an old climbing tradition. The group leader splits family members and loved ones into 2 different rope teams, separating Jeremiah and Selena and father and son, Cleve and Cole Joyner.
His whole reason behind that was, in case there was an accident, that the families wouldn't be together, so there'd be a better chance of survival or less injury.
Just before Jeremiah goes on ahead, Selena pulls him aside again with that nagging feeling.
I whispered this because I didn't want everyone to know this, since I was the only girl. I said, I am really scared right now. And he said, oh, we'll be okay.
It's just before 9 a.m. Selena and Jeremiah's groups are en route to the top. while preacher Thomas Hillman and Harry Slutter are in a group heading down.
We were at a stop. We were on the ridge, and I saw a red flash.
The red flash, Harry's friend Bill Ward in a red jacket hurtling down the mountain.
An incredible force literally ripped me from the mountain. I remember watching my ice axe just rip through the ice.
It's all happening so fast. Harry and his friend Bill and several others are in one tangled mess, heading right for Salina.
And I put my head down because all the ice was coming down on us and just prayed that we didn't get hit. But I was fully expecting an impact.
And then the bodies just started sliding into the crevasse, and you could hear them, thump.
Salina is somehow spared from the fall, but her boyfriend, Jeremiah, is not as lucky. Cleve's son, Cole, too, gone with several others.
And there was just dead silence. And I remember just sitting there looking, and 1,000 things went through my mind. The very first one was, they're all dead.
911, what's the location of your emergency?
This is on Mount Hood, on the south side, about 800 feet from the peak. We have 7 people down, possibly 4 injured. They fell into the crevice.
The news is more grim than Cleve thinks. 9 people, not 7, have fallen in. And if it only were just injuries. Harry Slutter, now deep in the crevasse, rolls onto his side and finds fellow climber John Biggs lying next to him.
I thought he was just knocked unconscious. He was... Sorry. I tried.
2 more who'd fallen, 3 in all, suffered the same awful fate. 3 climbers dead.
I had this wonderful trip where a half an hour ago we're all smiling. Go to the other extreme.
Cleve Joyner doesn't know it, standing 30 feet above, but his son Cole has survived.
I didn't even get the wind knocked out of me when I landed, so I just got up and did whatever I could.
The call his dad, Cleve Joyner, makes to 911 sets in motion a massive rescue operation. 6 National Guard and Air Force helicopters are on their way, but they're hours away. Of the 6 people still alive in the crevasse, 3 are badly hurt and need medical attention. And then, all of a sudden, the sound of chopper blades through the thin mountain air.
When you hear a helicopter, you hang so much hope that your friend is going to get off the mountain and get to a trauma center and be okay.
But when they realize what the sound is, it's crushing news.
Breaking news today on Mount Hood.
Rescuers are going after a group of climbers who've fallen into a crevasse.
Turns out, the first choppers to get there are news helicopters responding to the breaking story.
I was expecting something else, and here's a media helicopter flying up.
The news helicopters are no help to the injured. They're not equipped for rescue. And by now, the survivors in the crevasse managed to get the most critically injured climber, a man named Chris Kern, up to the surface. Selena Maestas, a trained paramedic, tends to him.
He would be in and out of consciousness. His hands were freezing, and I had an extra pair of gloves. So I took off his wet gloves to put the dry ones on, and I saw his wedding ring. And that really made me upset, knowing that he had someone that had no idea what was going on, and that he might not make it off that mountain.
Then finally, 12:50 p.m., 4 hours after the accident, the first National Guard Black Hawk arrives. It's dangerous flying in the thin air atop the mountain, but the chopper holds steady, lifting 2 of the most critically injured patients, Chris Kern and Thomas Hillman, off the mountain.
The prettiest sight I ever saw was seeing Chris go up in the litter and be flown off. Weight of the world off my shoulders.
Now Jeremiah Moffett is the only injured patient left on the slope, but that National Guard Black Hawk needs to refuel.
can see also flying around the summit, right over the top of the summit, is another military helicopter.
Waiting in the wings, an Air Force Pave Hawk. It's a little heavier than the Black Hawk the National Guard used, but the pilots believe they have enough power to perform a rescue even at that altitude.
This is kind of tricky flying when you're that close to the edge of the mountain.
As the chopper approaches, all seems well. The pilot eases it in perfectly, lowering a parajumper with a litter onto the slope. Next, as the Pave Hawk huddles close to the icy surface, the jumper hooks Jeremiah's litter to the helicopter's heavy metal cable. Now, every second is crucial. And then, suddenly, a change in the wind.
There we are talking about things going wrong. Hang on, fellas. Oh, my goodness. Oh, that is horrible. Good Lord. Oh, fellas. Oh, my goodness. You're watching this live, folks.
Absolutely couldn't believe what I was seeing.
More than 6 tons of metal flip over 7.5 times, rotors going in every direction. Debris and the crewmen flying everywhere. Jeremiah, who thought he was safe seconds earlier, nowhere to be found.
I thought he was still attached to that bird. That scared me to death.
And then something truly amazing.
I looked immediately to where Jeremiah had been on the mountain, and he was still there.
Jeremiah Moffett is saved.
When the helicopter started to lose control, the flight engineer who had been hanging on the cable was able to get across the cab and hit a button which sheared the cable and essentially blew it off, so I was no longer attached to the helicopter.
The 6 crew members in the helicopter came to help Jeremiah, but now they're the ones who need help. Look at the replay of the videotape. They're ejected, and the hulking helicopter rolls over some of them twice on the way down. But the mountain has another miracle in store on this day. Amazingly, only 2 of the 6 crew members suffer broken bones. The most seriously hurt, the flight engineer who'd cut the cable, saving Jeremiah's life and risking his own. Eventually, another helicopter picks Jeremiah up, and all 3 of the men choppered off the mountain are treated for their injuries. All 3 know they're the lucky ones.
It's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't think about Bill or Rick or John. I do think about them and how all of our lives have changed.
Selena Maestas says she learned a few things the day of that horrible accident, and she too is forever changed.
I definitely listened to my instincts. That little voice that made me scared before this all started. I'm gonna make sure I listen next time to it.
A year later, Selena went back to Mount Hood with Jeremiah, and this time made it to the top. And then after that, took an easier walk down the aisle with now husband Jeremiah. Coming up, firefighters battling a blaze.
We didn't know if Mark was being burned to death. We didn't know if he was incapacitated or unconscious.
The captain of a ship thrown into icy waters, and now he needs to be fished out.
Even if we'd gotten the basket right to him, did he have enough strength left over?
When caught on camera, Extreme Rescues continues.
Fire department emergency. There's a structure fire fully engulfed.
A fire rages through an abandoned apartment building in Kansas City, Missouri.
We got the top floor of a 3-story apartment building heavily involved.
Temperatures inside the building soar to more than 1,000 degrees, and the structure isn't stable. So firefighters mount an aerial attack, spraying water from 100-foot ladders hovering over the flames.
All stations put a man on watch. We're on second alarm.
Flames threaten a neighboring building, so firefighter Mark Ashley is told to get up on another ladder to prevent even more destruction.
Yeah, it's looking good up here right now. Looks like laser beams.
Ashley hooks himself in and tells personnel below to turn on his water. Firefighter Robert Bates is standing directly behind the truck.
Mark was on the very tip of the ladder, and I remember hearing the sound of metal kind of twisting. It made a very eerie sound.
Bates looks on in horror as Mark's ladder buckles.
It kind of just turned over,
and it just started to descend toward the building.
Sector Chief Tommy Walker's in shock, fearing the worst.
I honestly think I'll be going to Mark's funeral. I honestly think our flags will be at half-mast. I honestly